everyone. Kim here, and I'm in Ephesians chapter 3, and this is the third in a little series that I'm doing today, and it's from I'm looking at the whole section from Ephesians chapter 3, verse 14 through to verse 19. Though in my last video I just tackled verse 16 to the first half of verse 17. There was something that came to mind as I, having finished that video, that I think probably should be mentioned. In verse 16, where it says that he would grant you this. Now, this is Paul's prayer for the Ephesian church, that he would grant you according to the riches of his glory to be strengthened with power through his Spirit in the inner man. In the last video, I talked about that strengthening and that empowering that only comes from the Holy Spirit. And I also talked about that strengthening and empowering comes out of the riches of the Father's glory. And the Father's glory is expressed in Jesus, and we're joined with Jesus. The point I wanted to make about this was this. The empowering that God gives us is actually geared toward expressing his glory. It's something that comes out of his glory that expresses his glory. Now, in saying that, how do I put this? Because I've seen this in my own life. I've seen in my own life a desire to have myself glorified, and that glory, in other words, have myself be shown off, and that showing off of myself would be about the things that I kind of bring to the table. I found it that in my life I've tried to express my glory, and I have tried to cover my shame in relation to people. And I am aware that the whole issue of glory and shame is a huge issue, and all of us, and I'm not saying this just to cover my own back, but all of us come from a place initially where we lived with shame and devaluing, if you like. It's only as we grow in our knowledge of who God is toward us that we actually enter into proper glory. All the rest of the time, we basically, most of us would, well, certainly before we're Christians, our number one aim is to just to get through life and to show ourselves as show ourselves as being pretty good, and usually we are working our way through life trying to make people like us, trying to have people regard us highly, and have people consider us, and for some people they do that by having people fear them. For other people, they do lovely things in order that people will think that they're special. But the flesh, the life that we lived prior to becoming Christians, which is simply a life lived in the flesh, is a life that is self-centered. Doesn't matter how it's lived out. You could live your life doing all sorts of things for people, but the drive behind it is a flesh drive, which often has a lot to do, well, our flesh is about ourselves. And therefore, a lot of our lives are spent trying to deal with shame, that feeling of not being valued, or the feeling of not having been successful in trying to gain value and trying to cover that over and gain glory from something. And for some people, like I tried to do well at school. I watched my P's and Q's. I tried to look cool, all that sort of stuff when I was young. And as an adult, I tried to look competent and capable, and tried not to look like a fool, and which hasn't always worked. But my point is this. Those are two different drives. The drive to have yourself be glorified versus the desire to be empowered in order to have Christ glorified and the Father through him. They are two very different things, and they are things that we're going to be constantly struggling with throughout our lives, Because until we've been completely transformed by Jesus, and that will only happen on the day that we see him face to face when he returns. But until then, God is doing this refining process on our lives, causing us to more and more be reliant on him and giving him the glory, and being willing to get into situations and live our lives in such a way that we are not, our own self-glorification is not our primary agenda. Our own trying to deal with shame and try to be significant, all those things will not be our agenda, or will be our agenda less and less and less in different areas of our lives. Now, we human beings are tricky people. We do it in all sorts of ways. We'll have 50 different ways of trying to gain glory and get rid of shame. And really, as we, you can't combine living for God with that. The two things don't work together. So the whole issue of glory and shame is actually a big one. It is something that can get us off track in terms of our trusting God. It can get our eyes very much on ourselves, on our own achievement, what we did, what we didn't do, on our failures, on our successes, on whether people like us or whether they don't, on whether we're accepted or whether we're not. It'll get our eyes all over there, whether we look good, whether we don't. And the journey of being a Christian is to understand that God glorifies us. God glorifies us by joining us with his Son, and in us knowing him as Father. That is our glory. And it's further expressed when his glory, the expression of who he is and his life, is expressed through us. That doesn't make focus attention on us. It means that our lives are poured out expressing him. And some people will look at us and think, it's because of the person, because they're so used to thinking that if a person is expressing something that is good or valuable, that it comes from them. And for us, we can actually say, for Christians, we can actually say, if there's anything that good that comes through me, if there's anything true that comes through me, if there's anything kind or gentle, and can I say, to sum it all up, if there's anything godly, anything like Jesus, it's because Jesus is actually at work through me, showing off the Father. And that is in no way to denigrate ourselves. It is the absolute glory of Jesus to actually show off the Father. And for as Christians, we are learning that to show off the Father and to express the life of the Son is a magnificent gift, and is what we were actually created for, to bring him glory. It says that in Ephesians chapter 1. We've looked at it already. Excuse me. So, I just wanted to say, the issue of shame is a biggie, and you may be aware of things that have brought you shame in your life, and you may think you're the only one, but believe me, everybody's in the same boat to a lesser or greater degree. And some people don't even realise that they're living with shame because they've piled all sorts of things on top of it to try and make themselves look good. But as you do your journey with God, you discover, and God actually reveals areas of shame in your life, areas where you've felt little and belittled and embarrassed and like you're insignificant or treated like rubbish. God allows you to sort of confront those things, but he never just leaves you there. He's always doing it in order that we turn away from it and understand that Jesus has, in being united with Jesus, we are now sharing in his glory, and that his glory far outshines that bit of shame that we got. Now, the shame that we get from when we're younger can come in all sorts of ways. Usually it's through what somebody has done to us or said to us, or it's just a lie that's been popped in our heads, or it's something about ourselves, about our own bodies, or we've compared ourselves to somebody else and found ourselves lacking, and we believed the lie that that's where our glory comes from, when in fact our glory comes from God, and it's a relational glory, and and it is much, 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 much bigger and significant and glorious than what we think it is. Yeah, that's all I'd say. Anyway, I thought I'd mention that issue of shame and glory, because it is an issue that can sort of muddy our walk with God. And if His Spirit makes us aware of it, if His Spirit sort of tells us, reminds us or prompts us and says, "Oh, I think you did that one for yourself," all you do is you change your mind and you say, "Oh, Lord, you're so right. I think I was doing it for myself to make myself look good, and Lord, just do a work inside me by your Spirit, because the Holy Spirit will bring us the life of Jesus, and the life of Jesus just naturally lives to the glory of God. It just does that so well. So, and we have to learn to do that, to turn away from seeking our own glory to going, I live for His glory. I'm created for His glory, and the Holy Spirit can make that happen. Just thought I'd leave you with that. Have a good day. The fact that God is trying to do this shift in our life of wanting to get us to learn to live with His glory rather than be focused on our own glory and in our own issues of shame. One of the things that He will do in our lives often is He will bring us into places of weakness, into times when we feel a bit shamed and a bit embarrassed and what have you. And it's part of His training of us to not be overcome by it, but rather to put our hope in His glory instead. I just wanted to say that because so often we think about people who are walking with God, especially the people who are put in front of us a lot, people who are up on stage at church or at seminars or conferences and all that, and we look at them as being very victorious, as if they have their lives together. Now, this is quite fake. If you ask that person's wife or husband, you'd probably get a completely different story. Well, not completely different. In other words, you'd see more of the reality and of a person's life, the fact that there's a journey that they're going through. And if they're honest with you, they'll tell you that there are lots of places in life where God brings them into a place of weakness. And it'll be in an area where there's a glory-shame issue thing running, where we really have to simply put our confidence in the fact that God values us. In other words, He is expressing His glory, His fatherly glory toward us as sons and daughters, and that He loves us despite the circumstance we find ourselves in, or the feelings that we're having, or how people are treating us, or anything, or the fact that we've lost our job, or the fact that we got old, or the fact that we tried to jump the high jump bar and ran right into it, or the fact that, whatever. You could think of 100 things where we can be publicly shamed in some way. So just be aware that God, when those things happen, don't see them as accidents in your life, nor should you see them as God absolutely engineering them, but rather see them as things that God has allowed in order that we would put our hope in His glory, the glory that comes from Him, and train us just to look to Him. Yeah, I thought I'd pop that one in as well.